Hey everyone, what's going on? Mark here from TST Industries, back in the garage. And in today's video, I will be guiding you through the installation process of how to reinstall your OEM turn signals onto our TST Industries Fender Eliminator for the Suzuki GSX-8S and 8R. Now, it is important to note that we already have installation videos for our Fender Eliminator assemblies and for our integrated taillights. So for that purpose, as I guide you through this installation process, we will skip over those steps. But please, if you are not familiar with that process, we urge you to watch over our installation videos that are available on our product pages and on our YouTube channel. Now, this process will cover first removing your OEM turn signals and then remounting them onto our TST Industries Fender Eliminator. But it is important to note we do offer 3 Fender Eliminator options for this bike. This process can only be used with our high mount assemblies. So whether that's the standard high mount bracket or our adjustable high mount bracket, the steps that we are about to show can be used on either configuration. This assembly with reusing your OEM turn signals cannot be used with our low mount Fender Eliminator. And one last thing to note, it is imperative that you understand by removing your OEM fender, you do not only lose your turn signals, you also lose your OEM taillight. We already have our TST Industries integrated programmable taillight pre-installed on this model, so it'll make this a very speedy process. Once we remove the OEM turn signals and mount them onto our Fender Eliminator, we will be able to easily mount this entire assembly onto the bike, but please make note of that. Now, this entire process is pretty straightforward. Some basic garage tools are all that's needed. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So first you want to go ahead and remove your OEM fender. We have the OEM fender off the bike. We are going to flip it over, and as you can see, we have 9 different fasteners securing this inner shroud to the outer fender assembly. We also have 2 push pin fasteners located on the side, one here and one on the opposite side, that will need to be removed. All of these are self-threading plastite screws with a Phillips head on them. So you can go ahead and just grab a screwdriver and begin the disassembly process. All right, now we have removed all 9 of the Phillips head fasteners. We will go ahead and remove the 2 push pins located on the side faces. And now, if you're doing this, chances are that you probably won't reassemble your OEM fender to the factory configuration. But I always recommend saving this hardware or even reassembling it without the turn signals installed, just so that you have peace of mind knowing you still have your factory equipment laying around. Now, with all of the hardware removed, you should be able to flex the sides out and begin snaking the inner shroud away from the outer shroud. Now, what we will be focusing on are our turn signals. And if I invert this, you can kind of see what's going on here. We have our turn signal bolts locking the signals in place, and then we have the wiring snakes through. And if I just pull these out, you can see here it's very, very clean. Now we basically have full range of motion. Now, at this time, we need to go ahead and grab a 10mm open-ended wrench and remove these signals from their housings. I don't know how well you can see that on camera, but there's just one security nut locking this signal in place into the mounting bracket. Snake it all the way out. Keep the nut and this shoulder washer, and we'll repeat the steps on the opposite side here. just like that. And now we can go ahead and we'll gently just pull on this OEM assembly. We'll invert this once again and just reassemble it so that the tail light, the factory tail light, and the fender is somewhat assembled. We'll toss this to the side for now. We will not be using any more of the components along with the hardware that we removed from the OEM fender. Now, before we remount our OEM turn signals onto our OEM signal bracket with the supplied hardware, we need to make note of a few things. Our closeout is designed with 2 holes already in place, and on the reverse side we have a small pilot hole located here where you will be able to drill a hole if you're using external signals or a license plate light. For use of your OEM turn signals, you will want to use a 5/16 drill bit on that pilot hole. Now, another thing to note is with the 5/16 drill bit, you have the exact diameter needed to fit one of these OEM turn signal connectors through the housing. However, Suzuki has introduced this fairly thick wire sheathing on their OEM turn signals, and it's really not necessary for our application. However, we understand that this is a new bike. A lot of newer riders want to try and retain as much factory equipment as possible. So what I recommend doing is pulling gently on this sheathing, just like so, and you can actually split it. There is a very fine crack in the sheathing material, and if you're careful enough, like that, you can actually remove the sheathing entirely. Now, once you get to the very end, it is important to note that there are 2 sections that are taped. One is just with some basic electrical tape, and you can peel that off and retain it for future use, or you can just scrap it. Choice is yours. I will not be reusing it, so we'll go ahead and scrap it. And then we have some much nicer electrical tape as well. This is a fabric electrical tape. You will want to unpeel that as well. And the reason we are doing this, again, is because this sheathing is just a little too thick to fit through the hole in the closeout. So we're going to very carefully remove it as much as possible. And once we get to a point where we can no longer peel it, we will just cut it. Save that for a rainy day. And now we can remove the entire sheathing. Now, as you can see, we have some wires here. They have sheathing on them, but it is not this thicker weatherproofing material that Suzuki introduces. If you are one of those riders who likes to have measures in place in case of any crazy event, what you can do is measure out how much you'd like, cut it with a box cutter or a blade, and once the signals are reinstalled onto the bracket and onto the bike, you can actually just snake this back onto the wiring. I will show those steps when the time is appropriate, but for now, let's go ahead and repeat that on the second signal. All right, we have both signals extracted from the sheathing. Now we can focus on remounting them onto our signal bracket. It is important to note that the signal with the black wires and the red connector is your left turn signal, and the signal with the light blue and black wire and the black connector is your right turn signal. Now, when looking at our signal bracket, let's go ahead and toss this to the side for now. When looking at our signal bracket, we have a few different components. We have the actual signal bracket, 2 spacers to remount your OEM turn signals, and then the supplied hardware. Now, if you are using our adjustable Fender Eliminator, the assembly will look a little bit like this with the hardware in place. So, adjustable bracket will sandwich the OEM turn signal bracket to the closeout, and then with the supplied hardware from the turn signal bracket and 2 of the small washers from the adjustable Fender Eliminator assembly, you will secure that entire assembly in place. Now, if you are using our standard bracket, it will be exactly the same. However, the hardware will be a little different. In that case, you will look something like this: fixed bracket, OEM turn signal bracket, and then closeout. And you will go ahead and toss the bolts out that were supplied with the Fender Eliminator, but retain the rest of the hardware. We have 4 washers and 2 locking nuts, and we will use the supplied hardware from the turn signal bracket with washers in place on both sides of the assembly. Just like that, you'll be able to mount your signals to the closeout. Now, for this video, I will go ahead and I will be showing the installation with our adjustable Fender Eliminator. So let's go ahead and clean up this table. Now, for the signals, we do want the ears of the signals facing the front of the bike, so inboard. You will take one of our supplied washers and insert it on the interface, like so. And then you will go ahead and grab your turn signal. Now, just in this orientation, you can see I grabbed the signal with the red connector, that is the left turn signal. I will snake the connector through the larger hole, the circular one. Just like so. So again, just like that, falls right in line. And now you can go ahead and grab the shoulder washer that we removed from the OEM signal assembly and one of the locking nuts. Bottom it out by hand. And just like that, you have one of your OEM turn signals mounted to our signal bracket. We'll repeat those steps for the opposite side. Now we could grab our 10mm wrench and just tighten these down a little bit past bottom, just making sure that they're nice and snug in the assembly. You can give them a little tug, a little shake, make sure they don't fall out and they're not loose. So now we are ready to mount our signals onto the closeout and then our Fender Eliminator. However, we do need to drill out that hole on our closeout. As I mentioned, that is a 5/16 drill bit. As you can see, I just have a scrap piece of wood here. I already have a pretty big hole laid out in there from previous work. So I'm actually gonna superimpose the pilot hole right over that. Now we'll go ahead and grab our PPE. Always use safety goggles when you're drilling things. Now I already have my 5/16 drill bit in the drill. However, we're gonna start with a slightly smaller one just to create that true pilot hole. So I'm gonna go with the 3/16. All right, and right on center onto that pilot hole mark. Just like that, you can see the new hole right in the center. And now we will step up to our 5/16 drill bit. Just like that, we have a perfect hole right on center that falls in line with our mark on the inverse side of this closeout. Now let's go ahead and focus on the rest of this assembly. Now, as I mentioned, we do need to snake these wires through. and we need to be able to assemble our fender eliminator onto the closeout and the signal bracket. Best order of operations that I tend to find is superimposing everything first and foremost. So we will grab our signal bracket, and with the signal connectors in hand, we'll go one at a time. You can see it goes right through with ease. Toss one to the side and do the opposite one. And now if you find that the fit is a little too tight to get the second connector in, you can always bore it out a little bit more with that 5/16 drill bit, or you can grab a small file and just take a little bit more material out of the outer diameter. Now, with that in place, you can see just like that, we have the assembly configured in the way we want. And we can go ahead at this time. I like to leave a little bit of slack underneath, but at this time we're going to go ahead and take the 2 bolts that were supplied with the OEM turn signal bracket and those 2 smaller washers. We're going to drop them in from the top through the closeout and then through the OEM turn signal bracket, like so. Again, washer, bolt, straight through, just like that. Now, as you can see, what will be left prone to the elements, if that is your view, is this little bit of material here from the turn signals. If you wanted to, at this point, you can go ahead and cut off a small piece of this sheathing and lay it over those wires. And we will go over that process. But first, I wanted to pre-configure the entire fender eliminator assembly as it should be. So at this time, we'll leave this just like that. Now, one more thing to note is that as you assemble the adjustable fender eliminator, you will notice that the 2 bolts that adjust the angle of which the fender eliminator sits, or the bracket sits, can become obstructed with this assembly. Now, if you have a ball end hex key T-handle, shouldn't be an issue, but if you just have a straight hex head Allen key or a T-handle without a ball joint, you may want to set that angle at this time. Now, I have the luxury here of having a ball joint one. So what we're going to go ahead and do at this time is superimpose the standoff hinge in place, catch a few threads on one of the standoff hinges, and I'll be able to move my hand out of the way, give you a better viewing angle. Catch the second one. Now, before you bottom it out completely, we still have a lot of maneuverability in this assembly. So we just want to take a look at it, make sure it's centered off, give it a good old looks good to me, looks good to me, and then continue securing it in place. Once you bottom out, go another 1/16 of a rotation to an 1/8 of a rotation. Make sure you're really snug there. And just like that, you now have a fender eliminator, our TST Industries Elite 1 high mount fender eliminator with the OEM turn signals from your Suzuki in place. Now we can simply go ahead and mount this to the bike and finalize this installation. But as I mentioned, I did want to show you a few steps of reusing the OEM sheathing here. So we're going to invert this assembly, and we're just going to eyeball how much material we may need. And with a box cutter or a blade, you can go ahead. That would be a sufficient amount for the amount of slack we have. Now, this will vary depending on how much slack you did give yourself. If you pulled out more wire, you will need more material. So just use your brain. We believe in you. We have faith in you. You're watching this video. You made it this far in life. I think you're doing pretty good. We'll measure the same length unofficially. This is for all you garage mechanics out there. All right, so we have 2 sections of that OEM sheathing in place. What I find works best is find the seam and pry it open like so. And what you can do is grab 2 of the wires and feed them on just like that. And now, with the tool in hand, you can simply press down on this assembly and snake it all the way through, just like that. And now if you pull the slack, you can feed this into the opposite side. And now you have protective sheathing if you are one of those riders who likes having the extra security measures in place. We'll repeat that step for the opposite side. And you can see I did that without a tool that time. Didn't need the extra flathead, and I have ample sheathing in place. Now, if you did want to go ahead and on the inside of this assembly, once it's mounted to your bike, add on some more material just to protect these wires, you can absolutely do so. I believe what we've shown here gets you to where you want to be while making decisions on your own. So at this time, we're just going to go ahead, finalize this installation by installing this assembly onto our GSX-8S or 8R and be ready to ride. Now at this time, we can go ahead and route the wires from the OEM turn signals through the tail section and the subframe, like so. And now we can go ahead and secure our fender eliminator to the bike. Again, these steps are shown in our full installation video. If you haven't already, we urge you to check that out. Now that is locked in place. At this time, if you did want to add on more sheathing, this would be the appropriate time for that. And just like that, you now have an OEM-like setup on your one wire, and you can repeat the steps for the opposite side. Now, before we finalize this installation, we do need to check our configuration here and make sure that everything is functioning properly. Now, if you just plan on using our integrated taillight as just a running and brake light and are using your OEM signals for the signaling setup, you can just connect red to red like so. Test your connection. As you can see, we have running light, we have brake, and we have left turn signal on the OEM signal and nothing on the tail light. But if you are one of those riders that you want extra signals, what you can actually do is use our TST Y splitter and connect this into the OEM signal connection. And then you can grab the brown wire from our tail light and the red connector from the external signals, your OEM signals. And all of a sudden, you have turn signals in your tail light and your OEM turn signals all flashing at the same rate. Still have a running and brake light setup. It truly is everything you would want and more, depending on the configuration that you are trying to achieve. So just wanted to drop that note. A lot of people don't realize the capabilities of which we offer, but we like to make sure that we are hearing the entirety of the market and not just what we want to push. So we're going to go ahead and button up the rest of this installation, install the sheathing here, and then what we can do is reinstall the OEM hardware located in these positions. These are all push pin fasteners. 1, 2, and 3. And lastly, the Phillips head bolt located here. Just like that, this installation will now be complete once we connect these wires, and you'll be ready to ride. And just like that, you are now ready to ride. You have successfully installed your OEM turn signals onto our TST Industries Elite 1 high mount fender eliminators. And whether you chose the standard high mount or the adjustable high mount, you now have the confidence knowing you have OEM-like equipment while slimming out the rear, really streamlining the entire look. And if you are one of those riders who wants the added function of the signals that are integrated into our taillight, with the help of our Y-splitters, you have improved visibility to those riders and drivers on the road around you. Now, if you found this video helpful, we'd really love it if you gave us a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn notification bell on to stay up to date with all the new and exciting videos we've got going on. If you're interested in this kit, you want to find out more of what we are offering for the GSX-8S or 8R or any other bike that may be in your garage, please be sure to stop by our website, tstindustries.com. You can hit the link in the description below to check out the kit that we showed in this video. And of course, if you haven't already, please be sure to stop by our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all username TST Industries. For now, this has been Mark in the TST Garage, and we will catch you next time. Ride safe.